Welcome, IT changemakers, to the DEX Show with Tim Flower and Tom McGraw. Let's get into it.
Hello, changemakers. Welcome to Reality Bytes, the DEX Show's show within a show, where the two sides of the DEX industry's brain meet in the middle to tackle some of the biggest topics of the day. You find us today between so many things. We're both between the great show we did, Tim and I, with Martha Heller, that was released now just a week ago, and some great content that's coming up. But you're also finding us talking to you between or in the midst of Nexthink's Experience World Tour. So we're going to London, Frankfurt, Paris, and New York. Now, by the time you hear this, you'll probably missed all the shows. But don't worry, because if you check the show notes, you'll be able to follow the link, go over and listen to some of the content that you missed on video exclusively. And it's also, I should add, that you'll find that Tim and I were able to host the London and New York events. We did London last week. We had a fantastic time, and just want to say thank you to everybody who came and said hello and said that they liked and listened to the DEX Show. It was really lovely to get out there after so long and shake some hands. But we have a great show to get to today as well. I am joined by, on the content side, Sam Holzman. Hey, Sam, how's it going?
Very good. Happy to be back.
You're not back from anywhere, though, are you, Sam? You're just back on the show.
No, back on the program.
Back on the program. You've not been gallivanting around the world like some people at Nexthink.
Nope. I've just been patiently awaiting my next appearance on the famous DEX Show.
Not to rub it in, not like some people in the team who came to London last week. And, but anyway, I should move on perhaps. We're also joined by Megan Brake. Megan, how you doing? You will be joining us in New York the next week.
I'm good. Yeah, I'll be in New York next week. I'm looking forward to it a lot. I can't wait to see.
It's going to be great. And we are joined on the technical side of the Reality Bytes brain by Oriana. Oriana, how are you? Have you got any experience plans yourself? Are you in the Sam camp or the Megan camp there?
I will not be there, but I am cautiously optimistic that it will lead, or maybe not cautiously, but I am optimistic that it will lead to lots of great conversations.
Okay, yeah. It definitely will. I have to say there was a great attendance in London, a great atmosphere, and everybody seemed very keen to take their DEX journeys forward, whatever stage they were at themselves at that present day. So let's get into the show, everybody. I haven't decided whether we should hear from Sam or Megan first of all, although I know you've both got fantastic stories for us to discuss. Even if we are a bit of a skeleton crew, I think we're going to have a great conversation today. Let's go first with Megan.
All right, sounds good. So for this week, the topic I am bringing to the table has to do with the, by now I think among our audience, famous concept of XLAs, or experience level agreements, the sort of DEX step up from your more traditional SLA. Measuring not is the technology working, but how are people experience the technology as they're using it. And so obviously to have an XLA, you need to have a way to measure and quantify a qualitative measurement of experience, which often comes in the form of employee surveys and hitting your employees with a survey in the moment they have an issue and being able to ask, hey, how are you feeling about your technology? And sort of the question that I want to bring is, how much sentiment measurement, how many of these surveys is too much surveying? Like, in your pursuit of crafting a good employee experience, can you actually get in the way of that positive experience? And I wanted to provide actually an example from something I experienced once. This is not a work experience thing, but I think it's relevant. I was traveling once and I flew through the Singapore airport. And the Singapore airport, I think, is really famous for being like one of the best airports in the world. It's huge. I think it has like a museum in it or something, or like an aquarium. But every step of the way throughout the airport, they had these little terminals that surveyed you on your experience. And so it would be as much as like after you got your passport stamped, there was a screen where you could hit a smiley face, a neutral face, or a frowny face. In the bathroom, after you washed your hands, it would ask you if you had a smiley face, a neutral face, or a frowny face. And the first time I interacted with the screen, I thought, this is really cool. And yeah, I am having a good experience. And I hit the smiley face. By the end of my probably 5 hours in the airport, I'd faced so many of those screens at so many interactions that I was just hitting faces at random and not really answering honestly, because I was kind of I'm not frustrated by it, but sort of like, all right, this is a lot. Like, I'm not going to give you honest feedback anymore. So I think that it shows, I guess, the question I'm asking of like, can you get in the way of a good experience in your effort to create one? So that is my kind of idea that I'm posing to Oriana.
I think it's a fantastic question. We'll get to Oriana in just a second, who I suspect is going to have some extraordinary insights on this specific topic. But I mean, we're all Nexthinkers, so we all get surveyed, path of a course of various things. Sam, when you get a Nexthink survey, what percentage do you think you postpone answering the survey, and what percentage do you think you respond in the second?
All right, I'll be 100% honest here.
Come on.
Okay, this is, we bring the raw truth here. I'm going to be honest. I would say I postpone a good amount of them, but I think that's something that has changed a little bit over the years, just because working in these types of roles, surveys have been an annoyance in the past with the way they're delivered. And I think the delivery of these surveys is really everything. When you receive a email from whether it's your boss or HR or whatever with some anonymous survey, you're much less likely to take it, especially when they're being sent to you, frequently, and they're not super relevant to your job, or they're not personalized. So I think the delivery system for the surveys really has an impact on me as the employee in terms of whether or not I'm likely to pay it any mind. If I really think it's going to actually have some type of impact and is relevant to my job, then I'm much more likely to spend the time on it.
Yeah, totally. Like, I should stress to the listeners a couple of things. First of all, that when you get a Nexthink Engage survey, it pops up like on your monitor. It doesn't. It's not through email at all, so it's very, very easy and simple to engage with. But the other thing is, at Nexthink, we often have different departments who are experimenting with using the functionality to survey us on. We'll have Nexthink Live, which is where everybody gets company news, and then I don't know if everyone else gets them, right? You often get a survey about how useful it was, or what you would like to see differently. And I think quite often, like, that's a learning process, thinking about the content side of these surveys and how people respond to those. Probably some quite interesting data around that. Whereas if it's a technical question, particularly pertaining to some service I've recently had from IT, I think it's a very, very straightforward thing to just respond to. But this is, correct me if I'm wrong, Oriana, this is an area that kind of is so directly in your wheelhouse, right? This is an area of really, really specific expertise for you. So I'm really excited to hear what you've got to say about the whole issue.
Yeah, I feel like Megan chose this topic just to make my day, because I love talking about survey best practices. Yeah. In fact, we did an entire webinar for our customers last year on how to write better feedback surveys to collect feedback as an IT department. And it was great. We had lots of questions, lots of resources that we put together to go along with that. I think I'm going to actually just jump off of what Sam said, because I think he already hit some of the key ideas. So obviously this is a huge topic, but the timing, the relevance, and the impact are all super important, right? So when it comes to timing, we always want to be careful that we're not over inundating people, like Megan said, although I think a lot of people will just start to ignore those prompts, right? And that's kind of often the hope, I think, is that you will be only given as many prompts to participate as actually makes sense for you to participate, so that you don't just learn to ignore the signs. I'm actually really impressed that you kept responding, because I think most people do just ignore them. I know in an airport, I generally might respond to one or two, but I'm not going to respond to more than that in a singular airport experience. So the other thing that Sam mentioned is relevance and impact. So how do we make sure that as a participant, we feel engaged and motivated to take part? And part of that is being relevant. So like you were saying, right, if it's a technical question, that might only go to the people who are affected by that and have a relevant opinion. So making sure you target the right people is super important, so that you're not fatiguing other people. And that's what we call it. We call it survey fatigue, when you get too many requests or messages, because it's really demotivating, right? People are less likely to respond if it feels totally random. And also, people are more likely to respond if they know why their opinion is valued and needed, right? If I get a survey that's about my work experience and I know that my department genuinely cares about improving our experiences, that's going to make me more motivated to take part. And I think that connects back to this idea of impact. What is the takeaway from the survey? So as a researcher, this is something I tell people when they come to me and they want to do a survey. So I always ask them, what are you going to do with this data? Because if you don't know, I'm not going to help you do a survey that isn't going to have an impact, because I feel like it's so disrespectful to your participants and it really reduces trust. So I always want to make sure that we know what the takeaway is, right? If I'm going to survey our customers, that data has to go somewhere and have an impact that delivers them value. Otherwise, I'm just wasting their time. So, for example, when my department did a workplace survey, we then sat down together afterwards and talked about, what did we learn from this? What could we improve? And our director literally said, okay, this is the lowest scoring item. Let's brainstorm solutions. How can I improve? How can we improve? How can we make this better? And seeing that kind of impact really motivates me to provide feedback to Nexthink and say, yes, I want to give you my opinion because I know that you're going to use it and it's going to have that impact. So those are the kinds of things that I talk about with our customers and in my field in general, like when it comes to survey best practices, is make sure that you are not over inundating people. Make sure that you're giving them a relevant question that actually matters to them and that you're letting them know why it matters to them, why it matters to you to hear from that particular person, group of people, etc. And figure out before you start, what is the impact going to be? How are you going to use that information to make meaningful decisions that return value to the people who have gifted you their valuable time?
It's some excellent points there, and I'm interested to ask a couple of questions. But I'm going to first let Megan see if she has anything she'd like to ask since she brought the topic, and maybe have some follow-ups.
I think that everything you just said, Oriana, makes perfect sense. And, I can see how, everyone needs to be really conscious of these best practices because there's obviously some serious repercussions to, like, getting it wrong. And I guess I would wonder what your perspective is on the repercussions of not following these best practices. Like, what are the, I guess, risks inherent in that?
Yeah, I think there's a few different risks to doing surveys in ways that aren't that great. So one of which is just getting bad data, right? Like you said, if you're hitting buttons at random, that's not meaningful information. And so that's also really important when we talk about best practices in terms of how do you ask a good question, right? Bad data can be worse than no data because it might lead you in the wrong direction. If you're going off of anecdotal data, conversations, things like that, those are maybe limited data points, but they're hopefully not going to point you in completely the wrong direction versus if you ask a question that people don't understand or people are so frustrated that they're not giving a genuine response, that can point you opposite what your gut instinct tells you is correct. So there's, that kind of risk just in terms of data quality. And the other is engagement, right? So that's that idea of fatigue or burnout where people just don't want to respond anymore. You're not going to get good responses, especially when it comes to things like open-ended questions. It's a lot of work to type up a description, and if people are fed up and annoyed, they're just not going to do it.
Yeah, the style of question is really important, though. Sometimes we get questions from departments on engaging internally, and it is, as I say, it's an experimental process of different departments trying different things, and you get a question that doesn't quite apply to you in a list of answers, even set answers that don't quite meet it, and that's nothing's going to make me defer answering a survey than that. I've got a question for you, Oriana. When you look at I call it, as Alan Nance does, the experience economy that we're living in, and the experience economy requires nothing more than feedback for its continued evolution. How do you see feedback evolving over the next 5 to 10 years? Not so much in what's being asked, but in terms of the modes in which it's asked, the technology that's used, the way it's used. Like, do you have any gut feeling about where this is going more broadly?
Oh, this is such a big question. I mean, this is basically my entire career is predicated on this, right? That's why I am a user experience researcher, and I'm super excited to see the ways in which this field is growing, right? And I think that's the first component in my mind is there's so much more investment in doing good research and this realization that that is a specific field of expertise that you can train people in to ask better questions, to figure out how to apply those questions to holistic experiences rather than superficial sort of aesthetic choices. I think that's sort of the first one is a better understanding as a whole, and then integrating that into all different kinds of spheres of experiences. So not just the technology, but how it's situated. People doing research on IT teams, right? I've met at least one person who's part of a customer experience team and basically does what I do, but for an IT team at one of our customers, which I think is so, so cool.
Very cool. Well, I almost feel bad now, Oriana, asking for Sam's story. I feel like you've given us such quality, sustained insight there. But I'm going to do it anyway, because we've got no one else to ask today, Oriana. So you're on a double shift, okay? Sam, make it a good one. Make it a relatively easy one. Come on.
Gotcha. Hopefully this will be a relatively easy one because it is a bit more philosophical, but one that I still think does have some technical implications. And this story is about a term that's really been gaining popularity over the past year or so, which is work-life integration. If you're unfamiliar with this term, it's something like the 2022 version of work-life balance. You know, for years, if you look at any careers page or job listing, you'll always see companies loudly proclaiming the great work-life balance that they offer. It's kind of one of the hallmarks of any kind of recruiting strategy. But in a remote or a hybrid workplace, work-life balance has really become kind of a bit of a pipe dream. Like the notion that your personal home life and your work life can be separated and they're not going to naturally bleed into one another, it's just not realistic in today's workplace for a majority of employees. So that's where this term work-life integration comes from, which is basically a newer philosophy that actually leans into that blending of personal and work life a bit. Not in a scary way where you're always on the clock or anything like that, but it's more about kind of enabling flexibility and enabling employees to set their own work schedules and clock in at the hours that best fit their personal schedules. So if you're kind of a marketing manager and you work from home most days, and maybe on one day you have to bring your kids to school at a certain time or something, you have someone coming to work on your house, you can kind of create your own work schedule around those unique things happening in your personal life. So it's really de-emphasizing the traditional 9 to 5 work hours that we've always been accustomed to. So for the employee, in theory, it has a lot of benefits. It provides a lot more flexibility, but it does bring up a very unique and kind of new problem for IT people that's very different than the way things worked a decade or two ago, which is what happens when there are no standard working hours versus non-working hours. You know, even the employees who are working in the same time zone, they might not be working at the same hours. And so on the IT side, it really kind of raises that question of, is it possible to always be delivering effective service and always be ready for technology issues to rise up when you're supporting a workforce where, even the people who are in the same area, they might be working at unpredictable hours. So I guess for Oriana, I'd be curious to kind of get that comparison of whether you think of it as pre and post pandemic IT life, or just what it's like supporting employees who you might not even know when they're working.
Yeah, I was going to say, just to add to that as well before we go to Oriana, that I spoke to a customer about a year ago about their whole experience through the pandemic, and one of the things that this home work surge had actually done, we think of it as having kind of removed made the workplace a fully virtual environment, shall we say, right? That was its main effect. But one of the knock-on effects was upsetting the traditional working day, because they were all at home, they felt more comfortable working in hours that suited them. And what this guy was telling me was that it had a really interesting knock-on effect in turn on IT support, because they could no longer depend upon being called upon and required within those set parameters of the traditional day. And for that reason, things like proactive IT automation became particularly important during this pandemic period, and indeed the post-pandemic period, no less, also. Anyway, over to you, Oriana. Very interested to hear what you bring to the conversation there, too.
I think that's a great point about how proactivity is one of the ways of solving this problem, and to start to create an environment where or an approach to IT that isn't necessarily focused on that extremely reactive module of support. I think the other one is that we've already seen this shift, right? It might look different now with, things like flex hours and stuff like that, but already so many companies are international. Even in the US, right? We cover 4 different time zones, which means there's always going to be people working in different times. And I think that's also part of the solution. It's looking at how do we support those kinds of distributed teams. And I think flex hours works the same way. And ideally, right, ideal world, not saying that we're there yet, but that can also help provide things like work-life balance to IT people who are also working flex hours, and can ideally have that kind of benefit as well of being able to come to things and work at the best times for them. I know before we jumped on the recording, Sam, you're also talking about how you prefer to do your creative intellectual work in the afternoon, because that's when your mind is at its best. And I think that's something that I'm super passionate about, and I think is absolutely excellent, right? There are certain times that we can be doing things that are more repetitive, more rote-based, more sort of the boring but important stuff is how I call it. And then there are other times where we do our really great creative problem solving. And I think that IT has both of those types of work in my experience, right? You have the times where you're just going through and updating things. There are other times where you have a really thorny problem that you need to untangle. And that doesn't happen in an instant anyways. So I think that's part of the solution, is that you're going to have distributed IT teams that are working collaboratively on solving complicated problems, and those aren't going to be instantaneous, but you're also going to have expectations for things like SLAs, right, that are still going to be around even as we shift towards XLAs, that are reasonable, hopefully, and create time for those teams to work in ways that make sense for them. And then the other thing is, going back to that idea of XLAs, is what does the end user even want? Do people want instantaneous responses? Based on what I've heard from users, that's not necessarily what they're looking for anyways. What's important to them isn't necessarily that the IT person responds within, 3 hours. What's important to them is that they have a good experience, that they get meaningful solutions in a way that makes sense. And sometimes that means having a workplace of the future that involves being able to have proactive solutions that get pushed out directly to your computer, even when you're offline. Things like that really allow us to approach these problems from multiple different angles.
All right, well, I would give Sam a chance to come back with follow-up questions, but we are almost out of time, and Oriana has already delivered an excellent double shift from the tech side. Don't worry, Oriana, next week you'll be rejoined by Dina and Tim, so you won't be having to hold the fort completely single-handedly, but thank you so much for doing so well today. And just a reminder to listeners that they can find in the show notes links to Experience Everywhere content. If we did see you in Paris, Frankfurt, New York or London, thank you so much for coming. We hope you enjoyed it. And we'll look forward to seeing you very soon. Sam, Oriana, Megan, thank you so much. And we'll see you soon too.
Bye.
Bye.
To make sure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast player. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, make sure to leave a rating of the show. Just tap the number of stars you think the podcast deserves. If you'd like to learn more about how Nexthink can help you improve your digital employee experience, head over to nexthink.com. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.